Hello 2700, welcome to our second intro video. If you are just joining me, I had another 15-minute video right before this. It went over how to start a new document, add and remove pages, and do some other basic InDesign file setup. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, I'm going to insert some basic text. So the document that I'm working with right now is an 8x8 document. It is set up for the branding package assignment that we'll be working with, and it has 3 pages total. Okay. Now the first thing that I want to do in this video is show you guys some navigation. So I can scroll up and scroll down with my roller ball on my mouse, and it moves up and down the pages. I can also hold the Alt key down and use my roller ball to kind of zoom in and out. I think that's the most popular way of doing it. I am a little old school, and I actually use the Command or Control plus on my keyboard to zoom in and out. The other thing that you can do is you can come over here to your page navigator, and once you have a page selected, if you hit Control or Command 0, it zooms right into that page. It's essentially a zoom all. So again, that's Command or Control 0. At home, I work on a Mac, so it's a little bit different. And then again, Command plus or minus zooms in and out, but it's the same thing if you hold the Alt key and zoom in and out. All right, so whichever one you feel comfortable with, those are your 2 ways of zooming in and out when you are in InDesign. Okay, let's go ahead and get started talking about text. Everything in InDesign is done using something called a frame. So all images, graphics, and text get inserted using what's called a frame. A shortcut for frame is F, and you'll notice that my mouse is about to change. So if I hit F, it activates this frame shortcut over here. It's a rectangular frame. Now skipping ahead a little bit, if I right-click on this, you'll see that there's actually different types of frames. So you can do an ellipse or a circle or even a polygon. But for now, I'm going to stick with the rectangular frame tool. So you'll see that my cursor changes into crosshairs, and it's waiting for me to either click and drag and draw a frame, or if I click really quickly, it wants me to put in the dimensions. So I can do a 4" by 4" rectangular frame, okay? And again, I'm going to keep, as long as I keep clicking, it's going to keep drawing frames. So when you're done, remember, hit V to go back into selection mode. And that allows you to actually move these around. So now that I have a frame on my screen, I can click and move it around. And you'll see that when you get close to like the center of your page, there will be this pink bar that highlights. Those are called smart guides. It lets you know where the center of your page is. And you can line these up vertically and horizontally. So right now you should see those 2 pink lines. I'm going to delete this first one by just clicking on it and then hitting the delete key on my keyboard. So here is my first frame. Now remember, everything in InDesign is done with frames. Once I have it in here, I can click and drag these corners and I can fill up the page. I can kind of, just freeform it. Or if I wanted to be more precise, I can come up here to the properties bar, and while the frame is selected, I can say I want this to be a 4 by 6.5. Okay, so I can change the sizes up there too. So now that I have my first frame, what I want to do is go over basic text. So as I mentioned, this is just a quick overview on how to get around in InDesign. But as we keep progressing through the semester, I'm going to show you how to do a lot more with text and also with images and just layouts in general. So to get text in here, I hit T for text, and you can see my cursor changes again. So I'm on T for text, the type tool. And when I click in here, it activates the text. And you will hopefully also notice that my whole properties bar up here changed. So now I am in text mode. And I also have caps lock on. All right. Now, with this particular example, I think that almost everything in here works just like Microsoft Word. So for example, if you wanted to change your font, just like Microsoft Word, you have to highlight it first, come over here, find your your font. So I am looking for Century Gothic, and you'll see it shows you all of the different styles that it has. I'm going to do regular. If you watched my first video, you will have noticed that my computer is having a bit of a hard time tonight. I can change my font size. Right below me, I have leading, which is essentially the space between your lines. So let me do a couple examples. I'm just going to copy this down a few times so you can see what it's doing. But I can come up here and change my leading. I can highlight it and make it 10, right? So I can manually change this, or if I pull down, it's got some in there by default for me. So you can make the leading or the space between the lines bigger or smaller, or you can set it to auto, which is the default. So whoever designed this font, 40, 50 years ago, this is how they intended it to look like. The thing to remember, though, to make any of these changes, you have to highlight your text first. So I will go through some of these, even though, again, I think it's pretty straightforward because it's very much like Microsoft Word. But some of these buttons are kind of fun. So if I do all caps, now everything is in all caps. Let me do this real quick. I'm going to center my sheet. I can see it a little bit better. You can also do small caps. So let me click off of this and zoom in a little bit. I mentioned at the beginning, if you hit W, you can go from work mode to preview mode. So you can see that all caps, anything that's capitalized gets like a taller caps, and then everything that isn't is a lower cap. So if I were to come in here and do Naima Nawabi, like that, you can see what it does with these small caps. So let me turn this off. It just goes back to normal. If you ever wanted to do footnotes or endnotes, or let's say my name was Naima Mick Nawabi, oh, it did it automatically for me. But you could even, do something like that. Or if you were doing a footnote, like if you wanted to say exactly who Mick Nawabi was and give reference on, where you got your information, you could do a footnote and put in that information somewhere else. You could also, put something in like, let me turn that off now, deselect that. If you ever wanted to write something like first place, you could grab the ST and do your superscript, I think is what it's called. Yep, superscript, right? Another button that I think is really helpful that I use quite a bit is I'm going to make sure I use the right term for it, but this particular button right here, which I think is the kerning, I don't want to say the wrong thing, but it allows you to stretch out the space between the characters. And so sometimes if you find it's called tracking, not kerning. I apologize, tracking. This allows you to really do custom logos, get things looking really nice and clean. So I use tracking quite a bit, especially if I have made something be like full justified. Let me give you an example of this. So I just made that line full justified, and see how there's just really big spaces between these words. If I highlight this and keep spreading these words out, it ends up, I think, making them look a little bit more normal. So it doesn't just look like huge spaces between the words. We are distributing that space between all of the characters, not just the words. Okay, so again, that was called tracking, and that's this button right here. And one thing that I also want to mention is in the last lecture, I changed my workspace to Essentials Classic. Okay, it's going to take me a while to learn the new Essentials. This just changed a couple weeks ago We were at the end of spring semester when this update came in. Now these buttons I don't use often, but depending on the font that you're using, it could help. So you can see that this is actually vertically making my text taller. The default is 100%. So if you go lower at like 80%, it's making it squatty. I typically like to keep it right at 100. Whoops, not 1,000. Okay. And you can also make your text wider. So I'm going to go 150. On that same note, you can make it more narrow. Okay. So if you find a font that's almost perfect and you just want to play with it a little bit, you can use some of these features. Now the last thing I'm going to show you is kind of like a do-it-yourself italic mode. So here you can skew, or false italic is what it's called. If you have a font that you're using and it doesn't come in italics and you would like to make a few lines of text italic, you can use the skew feature right here. Now the only other things that I'm going to show you right now are these basic paragraph justifications that I think you would use in just about any Microsoft Word program. I think you're familiar with that. So when you are laying out your branding, you can decide if you want to do everything in one text frame, or you can do several text frames. Now one thing to note, I think this is a great shortcut and it comes straight from Photoshop. If you have a frame and you want to duplicate it, you can hold the Alt key down, and hopefully you see on my screen, as soon as I hit the Alt key, you'll see that my cursor gets an extra little arrow behind it. So for this to work, you have to be in V, the selection tool mode. And when I hold Alt down, I drag and pull, and that duplicates that for me. So if you want to, again, duplicate any frame, you can use the click and drag method for that. Okay. So this is really just inserting your basic text. So I showed you guys again how to do F to draw a frame. Okay. You go V to go back into selection mode, and you can kind of drag this around. I'm going to delete this. You could have also hit F for frame, clicked on your screen, and then said how big you wanted your frame to be. Okay, you could do that as well. And then once you have your frame, let me go back into work mode by hitting W. In order to turn your frame into a text box, we hit T. You can see my cursor update again, and we click in here and we can start typing. And then from here, the majority of the things that we're working with end up being a lot like Microsoft Word. Now, just a reminder that for your branding, you are pretty much working on individual pages. I don't expect any of your text to go from page to page, which would be a little bit different. So what I mean by page to page is if you were reading a magazine article or a book, you might have 3 columns of text and then it continues on another page. And so these text frames, as they're set up right now, aren't meant to go into another page or even another frame. That will be a little bit more advanced. Some of you guys might remember it from our 1200 class, but there are a few of you who haven't gone through that yet. So remember, this is just the basics to kind of get you started. So this is your text layout. The last thing I want to show you is I showed you how to copy when you are on a page, but let's say you wanted to duplicate this on page 3. You can use a simple select, and you can do your Command or Control C. Come to page 3 and do a Control V. Okay. The other thing that you can do is you can copy. You can click on it, right click, copy, go to page 3. I'm going to delete this one. And if I right click again, I can do paste or paste in place, and that puts it in the exact same spot. So if you look, it really put it in that exact same spot, which I think is really helpful. So that should be enough to get you started on your branding. The next video that I'm going to post will go over how to insert images, And then the last video that I'm going to post will be how to export it as a PDF. Thanks again for watching, and let me know if you guys have any questions.